Hey everybody, my name's Johan Philip.
And I'm Matt Carville.
And we are live!
Every Tuesday afternoon for Live Lunch. That is the place that we take the Sunday teaching and we have a discussion about it. We unpack the different themes, ask some different questions, and we're inviting you to get involved in it. Have a listen or submit some questions, that sort of thing.
And we have food.
We do.
So if you want to find out about some good eating options around Brighton and Hove, tune into Live Lunch. So you get fed, well, we get fed physically, but you get fed spiritually. Tuesdays at 1 p.m. live on Instagram, then the video does sit on YouTube and podcast. If you'd like more information about how you can join in with the conversation at Live Lunch, weareemmanuel.com/live lunch. We look forward to seeing you there.
See you then.
Hello everybody, welcome to Live Lunch. My name is Rachel and I'm an intern here doing media and kids stuff, and I'm really excited to be talking on the topic of faith and trust and all things that. We're doing Genesis 41 and I'm joined by George Benson.
Hello.
Welcome.
Hi.
Lovely to have you. And Tim Jones.
Hello.
Again.
Nice to be with
Back
you.
again.
Hi.
Lovely. Lucky me.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, so we were doing Genesis 41 this week on Sunday. Stephen Dawson preached to us. And George, you had a little bit of like a...
Yeah, so we
Overview.
reached the point in the story with Joseph where he's languishing in a prison. He's been forgotten. It's all a bit sad, although he doesn't seem to be. And Pharaoh has some dreams that are disturbing to him. Dreams about 7 fat, plump cows that get eaten by 7 skinny cows, and then 7 wonderful-looking ears of grain get eaten by 7 emaciated kind of ears of grain.
A lot of sevens knocking about.
A lot of 7s, and he is understandably worried about this. So he's asking people to interpret these dreams for him. No one can. And then the cupbearer from our story the other week goes, I know a guy who is good with dreams. And so finally, 2 years a bit late for Joseph, he remembers him. And Joseph comes, interprets the dreams, and then I think we will read out that end bit of the story, which happens after he's interpreted the dream for Pharaoh.
Yeah, sure. So this is Genesis 41:37. This proposal pleased Pharaoh and all his servants, and Pharaoh said to his servants, "Can we find a man like this, in whom is the Spirit of God?" Then Pharaoh said to Joseph, "Since God has shown you all this, there is none so discerning and wise as you are. You shall be over my house, and all my people shall order themselves as you command. Only as regards to the throne will I be greater than you." And Pharaoh said to Joseph, "See, I have set you over all the land of Egypt." Then Pharaoh took his signet ring from his hand and put it on Joseph's hand, and clothed him in garments of fine linen, and put a gold chain about his neck. And he made him ride in his second chariot. And they called out before him, "Bow the knee." Thus he set him over all the land of Egypt. Moreover, Pharaoh said to Joseph, "I am Pharaoh, and without your consent no one shall lift up hand or foot in all the land of Egypt." And Pharaoh called Joseph's name Zappaneth. And he gave him in marriage Asenath, the daughter of Potiphar, priest of On. So Joseph went out over the land of Egypt. Joseph was 30 years old when he entered the service of Pharaoh, king of Egypt. And Joseph went out from the presence of Pharaoh and went through all the land of Egypt. During the 7 plentiful years, the earth produced abundantly, and he gathered up all the food of these 7 years, which occurred in the land of Egypt, and put the food in the cities. He put in every city the food from the fields around it. And Joseph stored up grain in great abundance, like the sand of the sea, until he ceased to measure it, for it could not be measured. Before the year of famine came, 2 sons were born to Joseph. Asenath, the daughter of Potiphar, priest of On, bore them to him. Joseph called the name of the firstborn Manasseh, for he said, "God has made me forget all my hardship and all my father's house." The name of the second he called Ephraim, "For God has made me fruitful in the land of my affliction." The 7 years of plenty that occurred in the land of Egypt came to an end, and the 7 years of famine began to come. As Joseph had said, there was famine in all lands, but in all the land of Egypt there was bread. When all the land of Egypt was famished, the people cried to Pharaoh for bread. Pharaoh said to all the Egyptians, "Go to Joseph. What he says to you, do." So when the famine had spread over all the land, Joseph opened all the storehouses and sold to the Egyptians, for the famine was severe in the land of Egypt. Moreover, all the earth came to Egypt, to Joseph, to buy grain, because the famine was severe all over the earth.
Yeah. So Joseph's interpretation of the dream came true. And
Yes.
God kind of has a moment of vindication for Joseph. He's finally had his moment. He's been heard. And all the promises that he's heard when he was a young man come through when he's 30. And Stephen looked at... he sort of finished the preach by looking at different ways God speaks to us. Obviously, there's a big theme in this part of Genesis. God speaking to people through dreams, and speaking even to Pharaoh through dreams. And but he also looked initially more at just the providence of God, how God intervenes in history, the way that God uses these people in these situations. So he uses Joseph, but he also uses the cupbearer, even though the cupbearer doesn't do very well. He forgets Joseph, promises to remember him and forgets him, and even ends up using Pharaoh, who's this kind of tries to be God himself, almost devil-like figure, and yet uses him in his plan. And so those were the themes that came through. We've got a couple of things we'd like to focus on.
Yeah, I mean, as you say, like it's kind of Joseph being restored after we've read about him being in the pit and still trusting God, and then coming to this point where he's being brought in to see the king and given nice things and kind of given this honor, but the same trust. And I just thought it would be interesting to talk about that topic of trust, really, because I find it fascinating. How can we trust God, firstly? You know, what does it look like to trust God? I wonder what you think, Tim.
Yeah, I think it's great that George mentions that God can and will use you whether or not you're rightly formed as well. God will deal with your life. He'll work in your life, and you may not detect that, but he'll bring about his plans. But you can work with the grain of those things. You can. There's
no pun intended.
Yes, yeah. The good ears of grain. But yeah, you can work with the flow of what God is doing and actually just align yourself with the purposes of God. The fact is, you're always being built. You're always being formed, and so you should attend to that. It doesn't matter what your belief is at this juncture in time. You should know that you're being formed. You're being built in a certain way in your life. You're being constructed by the things that you view, the relationships that you have, the ways that you spend your time. All of that is building you into a vessel of one sort or another. And gifting, so it's dream interpretation in this case, or hearing God, as we were talking about last week. That could happen. God could say, right, here's a gift, but you might not be the right vessel to do much with that gift, or hold on to that gift, or steward it. It might swell your head and make you like, I'm the dream interpreter. You don't see that with Joseph. He is operating this incredible level of gifting, but in a way, he's always deferring, saying interpretations belong to God. Remember that in the text from last time. It said interpretations belong to God. Now tell me what you dreamt. And Joseph says to them, look, hey, interpretations belong to him. Now tell me.
And that's quite different to how the king's trying to go to all these magicians and other people that claim to have powers.
They have a reputation. Yeah.
They have, but that's coming from their own, like, I have this gifting and here I am to give it to you, whereas Joseph is always God first.
And they might not be wrong that there's gift. You might have giftings in your life that you're certain are there and you're sure are there, and you almost rely on, or you rely on people viewing you as having those. That might be how you relate to them. Joseph has learned something else because he's relativized his life. He's relativized his life in orbit around this God who has started dealing with him and is dealing with him over a long, slow process in his life. Is shaping his character, he's forming him so that when the time comes in the passage that you just read so beautifully, it comes time that he has to step up and take responsibility and even receive honor. You know, it says when he goes past in his chariot, everyone's like has to bow the knee.
Yeah.
Now that could really go to your head if you haven't been formed in a sense where you are very sure that you're second at best. You know, that God is first and foremost, and you're the creature, he's the creator, he's relativized your life. And it helps you almost to surge forward in gifting when you're released of carrying the primary burden of answering for it. So there's all that kind of stuff.
And that links into like just having that pride, and like maybe you see that in churches quite a lot, because things can go to your head, and you see it in celebrity culture for sure as well. So it's just interesting to see someone be clothed with such like honor and dignity, but not let that overstep God's
and it's not pretend either. It's not just like some false humility. The way that he sees his life and the world is that it's God's world, that he's God's creature. He's underneath. He's not fighting or vying for position. And so you don't see that weird anxiety that comes along with holding yourself in first place.
What would you say to someone that's like sees that negatively, like sees that as having to be under the control of somebody, or having to, you know, feel less than in that way? I think that, you know, sorry George, I'll let you speak in a minute, but yeah, just a thought on that one, that you're arguing against reality if you try and put yourself in first position. So say you're completely atheistic in your viewpoint, you're still kicking against the fact that you are a contingent creature. You didn't choose to be born. You know, you came about by whatever means, but you are dependent on at least your mother and father, and actually as you start looking at it, well, and much more, the evolutionary process, the world that's given birth to anything that is, you know, and actually the more that you look at what is, the more you see that there's personality behind it, which means that there's a possibility at least of a great creator who has rights over you, and that's something that you then start having to you should contend with that really honestly, whatever your worldview. And that's quite a wondrous thing, isn't it, as well?
Positively it is, and I think you get there, but initially it might be a very daunting thing, especially if you've been used to trying to assert your own identity and your own credentials and your own gifts. So I think being relativized can be quite a painful process, you know.
Yeah. Do you think, George?
Yeah, I think there's an interesting mix in being a Christian and following Jesus of the Bible does have lots of kind of, I guess, sort of submissive language. We lay our lives down and that kind of thing. But there's also quite a lot of language of freedom. Like it was for freedom that we were set free.
Yes.
And live as those who are free. We're encouraged to do that. And so to someone who said, I don't know about that's the surrender part of it, and I have had those conversations. It's like I don't like the thought of surrendering to someone. I think it's you've seen something real in what is being asked of you if you were to become a Christian, but I think there's also a freedom in the bowing before the person who made you and made you for a certain purpose. And so even though we live lives that to whatever extent, depending on how we're feeling on the day, but we are aware of, as Joseph does, okay, I live under, Jesus is called a king. I live under a king and I follow him. And you're aware of God's sovereignty in that day to day. But there's also a real experience of freedom in that. There's a real freedom in being who you were made to be because you're following the one that made you and knows the way to do that. So I guess I'd say that I'd say you're seeing something real. You're worried about sort of submitting, and that's I don't want to say no, it's not like that. Yes, it is. Yeah, we are called to. Jesus says you need to lose your life to find it, but there is a finding of life and of freedom in that. So
I can definitely relate to that freedom aspect of just like, it does feel sometimes that you have to give quite a lot and sort of do this surrendering process, but then that leading to freedom, but people on the outside looking in maybe don't understand that because they maybe are like bound to the things that they want to do. And I feel like this is talking a lot about trusting God, which sometimes means we're not in control and we don't really necessarily know what's going to happen. So yeah, I just find the topic of like trust and faith so interesting, and I wanted to put out to the group, like how do we even define like what is faith? And because I feel like with this, Joseph exercises faith the whole way through, and even, you know, the king is exercising faith to Joseph from what he's seen. So I don't know, does anyone have any thoughts on like what it even is?
I think the first one is that submission isn't blind. That it's not just I know that it's become a very common phrase, the leap of faith, and that goes back to like Søren Kierkegaard, and I just don't relate to that. I don't think that's what the scripture's calling you to when it calls you to faith. It's not saying it's a leap of faith. It's like belief in spite of all of the evidence. It's not supposed to be like that. It's belief in coherence with the way that God has revealed himself in time and space and in the scriptures. It's written down. Like I like to think that he writes his story with lives. You know, that's the way he does it. And the good, the bad and the ugly, and more often the bad and the ugly of these lives, but the faithfulness of God shown all the way through. And if they show a modicum of trust, then there's huge benefit results for them. And really, rather than seeing it as a leap of faith, I think you should see it in your life as an inductive process. It's actually that you are taking one step at a time. You're not making a absolute irreversible zero-sum bet every time, which if you fail, everything fails and it all goes down. That's not what you're invited to. You're invited to incremental trust that God's saying, test me. You know, like, can you imagine the living God, the creator God, submitting himself to us in such a way that he says, trust me, you know, and then we falteringly do, and then we don't. And that's the reality of any life of attempted faithfulness, or not faithfulness just in the sense of doing the right thing, but attempted dependence on God. It is one step forward, two step back.
Yeah.
You know, there's that kind of thing, but you've got a God who is the God of time and space. He's got all of the time. He's very patient, and actually wonderfully patient. As you realise, what I mean is, you think to yourself, surely he can't still put up with me after this. Surely he won't give me chance number 5,000. You know, and actually you keep getting kindness. You keep getting met with kindness, and it changes you. Yeah. And it builds you in a character that is bent towards trust, which is therefore able to steward gifting. You know, so. Yeah,
that's so good. Just what you're saying about it being, you know, a personal relationship. So it's not like you were describing, it's just some irreversible decision. I think a lot of people get scared to become a Christian because once they're in, they can't leave, and it's like, you know,
it's
that's
a lock-in.
it's not, that's not what relationships are. Like, you know, I could be friends with somebody and we could fall out, or I don't know, something could happen, and you always have freedom. And I think that's, you know, the beauty as well, linking back to the freedom aspect, is like there's a freedom in that. We get to choose to have trust and relationship.
There's always a dance in a relationship, isn't there? There's always like actually you're responding to the moves that are made by the other, in whatever situation it is, and you grow in confidence as well. You grow in confidence in the person with whom you have to deal.
So faith not necessarily being like a thing you can, it's difficult to define, but it can be seen through the relationship that we have with God. Like, it can be built over experience.
And I think people find it difficult because you're talking about, you know, if people putting it cruelly, they say, well, you're talking about your sky fairy or your sky daddy, and this kind of thing where it's just seen as sheer fantasy.
Yes.
But because the nature of the person they're talking about is of such an order that it's very hard to. We don't have any other categories for it. You're talking about the uncreated creator. But then that makes things like the incarnation all the more amazing, that you've got one who is completely other than all else that exists, but then comes and submits to it and becomes the most intimately involved within it to bring it back to himself. That's got to be a unique feature in Christianity as well. You don't see that in any other faith or any other idea. You do see bits of truth in other ideas, like any religion that's talking about this supremely powerful and all-knowing and all of this, but then has the problem of the intimacy aspect.
Yeah.
How does God come to you? And the answer is usually he doesn't. You have to just try and live your life and then get weighed in the balance or something like that. And Christianity is not like that at all. It's about the God who comes near.
I mean, I definitely didn't know that.
Yeah, why would
outside
you?
looking in.
Do you know what I mean? Like, it's just, yeah, I think we all have our preconceptions about what Christianity might be, but I think you realise it's called good news for a reason. Yeah. It's like, that's really good news. It's that actually you're not losing anything of the grandeur and the greatness of God, but you're being brought into the relationship as well.
Yeah, it's so great. Just like the relationship thing being just number one, really.
I think that's massive what Tim just said there. Like the faith that we're encouraged to is a personal faith, because at the centre of it there's a person, and not just a person as in God in and of himself and unknowable, but God putting on flesh and becoming a man, and a man you can read about. And really, faith in the Christian God is faith in Jesus. And I'm slightly moving on the topic here, but something that really struck me on the subject of staying faithful and trusting in God. There was an elder at the church in Emmanuel called Steve Wolford, and he retired, I think, last year. And I was sort of hosting the meeting where he was. I was asked to ask them some questions, get some wisdom from him on his last Sunday, and it was him and his wife Rosie on the stage, and I'm there in the evening service, lots of young Christians there, and I think, it'd be great to get some wisdom on how you are faithful for the long haul. These guys have been so wonderfully faithful, trusted God in all circumstances. So I asked a question. I said, have you got any wisdom for us on how to trust God for the long haul and how to be faithful? And Rosie got the mic and she said, I don't think you are. I don't think trusting God for the long haul I can't quite remember how she phrased it. It was like, yeah, you're not going to be. You're not going to be you're not going to be faithful the whole time. But he is. And that's the point. And it's like, it was kind of this shattering moment. I thought, she'll have some great ideas for some, disciplines of prayer. And I'm sure she would say all of those things. But just in the moment, it's like, you're not going to get this right all the time.
Yeah.
You are not going to have a story of 100% trust for 40 years. It's not going to happen. But he will always be faithful.
Yeah.
And that's why the Christian faith is a personal one. Because it's faith in the faithfulness of Christ and his commitment to us. And when we're not faithful, he is. And I hope that's helpful. I'm aware it's not quite what we're
really
asking,
great.
but it's stuck with me.
Just add on to that when you are faithful, you are happy as well.
Yeah.
It's worth saying that, because yes, you've got this freedom. Actually, you've got freedom to fail. You will fail, and you're free. But you'll get a taste for faithfulness as well. You'll actually be like, things go better. It's not just that I feel prouder and I just feel right. You want to feel. You want to feel right, and you want to feel good and satisfied, and those things are all connected to that. Living in faithfulness, living in trust, living in love and joy of the Lord. All of those things are being offered to you and repeated, and you're being trained in them. That's the point. It's that long training.
That's it.
And just ruthless devotion to you, not your ruthless devotion to him. He's unshakably devoted to you, and you being formed and you being completed.
Yeah,
it's a great thing.
It is, and it's like when you feel like you're not being faithful on those days, you can feel like that you're not good enough, that you're not performing well enough, that you're anxious, and those are all missing the point in which you just said. It's like, it's not based on our faith, it's based on who we have faith in, who is not going to be...
He's infinitely pleased with you.
Yeah.
That's the thing. That's the thing that people might not understand about Christianity as well, is that he is as pleased with you as he is with Christ, and he is maximally pleased with Christ.
Mm-hmm.
If anyone's a Christian, they are in Christ.
Mm-hmm.
So it means that when God looks upon you and looks upon your life, he's maximally pleased with you all the time.
Yeah.
And he's bringing you into the reality of walking in line with that.
Yeah.
That's true Christianity, and it's an amazing thing.
It is.
Nothing
And
like it.
yeah, I mean, yeah, like you were just saying, when you're living in that, you know, when you're walking in the Spirit and you're enjoying the gifts of God, like peace and love and all of that, you start to chase that. And that is him kind of training you in faith, because, you know, oftentimes we like to do our own thing and go down our own path. And then I think on my Christian walk, being like almost 3 years, I can so see now when I'm going the wrong way. Like it becomes so much more apparent. Like I can almost
do you
feel.
find that you're more sensitive to it as well if you do go wrong?
Yeah.
Like, there's a dynamic in the Christian life where you can feel like you're actually getting worse.
Oh,
because,
yeah.
Just because you. But then if you think about it, you're like, well, actually, I wouldn't have cared about that 5 years ago. I wouldn't have even seen that as a problem.
100%. And I don't think it's like I'm, you know, really thinking about every single decision and stressing. It's not that. It's just that, like you say, I'm more sensitive to when I'm going the wrong way. It's almost like someone's like, yo, like you're going the wrong way. And I'm getting the feelings that having a relationship with God has gotten rid of anxiety for me. So when anxiety comes back, I'm like, oh, something's not right. Whereas before, I would have anxiety, but I would just think that it was part of life.
Right.
So I would either sit in it and be like low for weeks, and like you do when you have anxiety, you don't want to talk to anyone or go out or whatever. Or I would just try other methods to try and remove it, but I didn't have a relationship with God. But now if anxiety comes about, that's when I go to prayer. Mm-hmm. And then it's like you can just diminish it.
And here's the thing: the diminishing is an important thing, because that's talking about something that changes over time. That is, I guess we can sometimes look at, you know, a loved one and think the change that needs to happen is this, and try and do it in one fell swoop, or like from a paranoid control thing where you're just, it needs to happen, and I can see how it happens. Let me get in there quick and make the change while I can. There's none of that sort of like paranoid working with God. There's this like, you know, he's so kind that the changes that he's effected in you, if he'd done them in one go, it would have blown your mind. You couldn't take it. If he told you everything that's going to happen in your life going forward, you couldn't take it. But he's merciful and incremental and, you know, relational in the way that he moves you and changes you and builds you.
Yeah, he's so gentle, and he does take you day by day, step by step, and it's so kind. Because like you say, if someone told me like this and this and this was going to happen to you, I'd be like, whoa. But the way in which he does it is so great, because it's almost like, just slowly over time he's like shaping you. But it can feel overwhelming when you're not having that much faith, or when you're going through a hard time. It can feel worse. It can feel like, oh my gosh, I'm doing something wrong. And that's when you just have to keep going back to the truth that you were saying earlier, George, which is always so encouraging. And it's always just that it's so easy to forget as well. Like we've got Jesus, like read about Jesus, read about his character, who he is, you know, that's who we are relying on. And it's great.
It's so weird, you never get past it as well. If you read the Gospels 1 year to the next, you never get to the bottom of Jesus. And that's for a Christian reader or any reader. You just never get to the bottom of it. You're gazing at this person, God in the flesh, and it's wondrous.
It really is.
Yeah.
It really is. Well, that's a great way to end Live Lunch. Yeah. So thank you guys so much for coming on.
Thanks, Rachel.
And I hope you have enjoyed. See you next week. Bye.